On the 4th of February 1856, a 17-year-old girl woke to the start of a new day. A housemaid by the name of Jane Blakemore, she had only been working at the farm for a few weeks, having left her family home, along with her mother, father, and 3 younger siblings, to live at Longswood, under the employment of Mr. William Miner and his wife. No doubt rising early to help Sarah, the household's cook, with the usual morning chores, Jane dressed in a brown and white dress, a black apron, black stockings, and black slippers. She chose a cap with blue ribbons, a delightful colour for a cold winter's day. As a housemaid, it was Jane's duty to attend the bell. She was, so her employer, friends, and family later told, perfectly cheerful, happy with her work, and even starting to save a portion of her earnings in a box in her room. That day in February ought to have been no different. And yet, at around 8 o'clock in the evening, after cleaning the cutlery that had been used that day, Jane went for a walk in the garden. Complaining of a pain in the bowels, she was at first joined by her friend and work companion Sarah. A walk would surely ease the pain. Sarah told her that she would make her some ginger tea once she was ready to come back in, and would listen for the bell for her in the meantime. 5 minutes later, the bell rang, and so Sarah called for Jane to come inside and attend. There was, however, no reply. Jane was not there, and indeed would not be seen alive again. 10 weeks later, her body was pulled from the River Tern, only a short distance from where she had gone missing. The subsequent inquest ruled that she had been found drowned, but by what means she was drowned it did not appear. And yet, Jane was not drowned. Jane had not even been in the river for 10 weeks. Jane was murdered, her body taken elsewhere by her killer, before being dumped in the river only a few days before it was discovered. And this is the story of how I not only came to know and prove this, but know the young woman herself. In 2017, I set myself an incredible challenge, the sort of challenge that only a naive 21-year-old could set, and that was to make a documentary film which could prove somehow the existence of life after death. 2 years later, I released this film along with my husband Erik, and its name is In Search of the Dead. And it was supposed to be a survey of belief in life after death, a journey which I would go on in order to interview and meet with people from all sides of the spectrum of belief, from people who actually work within the paranormal, practice the paranormal, whether that be as psychic mediums or paranormal investigators, right down to the other end of the spectrum in terms of scientists, people associated with academic institutions, researching the paranormal, or even quite possibly offering explanations as to why the paranormal is not actually real. Not once during this journey did I think that I would myself become entangled in this question of belief. I began as an objective, or so I thought, objectively minded skeptic, someone who from a very early age has had an interest in the paranormal, but who has never felt comfortable labeling themselves as a believer. I've always been curious and open-minded, but also more towards disbelieving simply because I hadn't had an experience, or so I thought. I want this video to be an overview of some of the key personal moments that took place within the documentary film, and also what has happened in the time since. So if you haven't seen In Search of the Dead, or you haven't seen any of my other references to my personal research in this regards, hopefully it shouldn't matter. Hopefully this should be a good starting place, a full picture, and also a refresher for those of you who have come along with me on this journey. There's also going to be lots of new information which I hope will leave you profoundly changed, as I have been. The more we filmed for In Search of the Dead, the more it became clear to me that I was not going to be able to leave this unscathed. I was going to have an experience, and I did.
What are you picking up, bud? I ask a question, like if I say, where's the spirit in relation to us? And they point at them. And then I ask just random questions and see what they tell me. If they cross, that's a yes. If they open, that's a no, or vice versa. I was asking where the strongest energy is.
You going over there?
No, but he's pointing at these two for some reason. I don't know what I was asking. I don't know what they're doing.
Oh, it's following me.
Yeah, it was pointed, both of them pointed at you end. I said, and it went over there then.
You asked what's the strongest energy, as in spirit
I said,
energy.
who's the strongest person you connected to?
Oh, okay.
And it pointed at the pair of you, like. It pointed to you, and then that one went over there.
Could you ask something else?
Yeah, I'm asking. Okay.
Ask out loud then, so we can...
Sorry. Yeah, if when I ask out loud, I find I got to really focus my answer.
Right.
So that's why I say it in my head.
And then...
I asked you, have you got a message? And he said, yes.
When filming, Erik and I arranged to meet with various different people who we wanted to include within the documentary. And one person, or rather group of people, was a paranormal investigative group based in South Wales called Paranormal Now. And they comprised 3 members, 2 of whom were fully fledged psychic mediums, and the third who was more tech inclined and also developing mediumistically at the time. The intention was that Erik and I would meet with them in order to observe how they investigate the paranormal, what their relationship with death and life after death was, and given that they were mediums, to see what that meant and how they practiced mediumistically. We had never really done anything like this before and went in completely open-minded and curious and without expectation. We agreed to meet them at a graveyard. This was a location of their choosing, and we just went along.
I was asking, do you have a connection to you two? And they were saying, from somewhere you've been. It's a place you've been. It's Are you picking up anything, Jack? Got a funny energy, but
I got a real nervous energy, but...
Quite soon after arriving, it became clear that Erik and I had agreed to something perhaps a little bit different than we had realised. We had thought that we were going there to observe, but very soon we were drawn in to the investigation. In particular, one of the group's mediums, Richard Oliver, started offering information that he was reading from Erik and I. We had not expected this, but being in the situation that we were to observe, we just kept the cameras rolling and just listened and waited to see where this would lead.
I've seen a girl, right, and she's got a very pale dress. It's sort of like got a puffy sort of shoulder with buttons on a bit of a frill, and she's fair, and I'm asking her to show me where she's come from, and she just keeps showing me steps, and I'm seeing stone steps and like a stone wall.
Richard began revealing information that was very relevant to me. And I told him at the time that it was relevant, but I didn't explain why or how it was relevant. I wanted to see where the information led. In particular, he described a young woman or a girl who was associated with me. He gave a physical description of her and said that he was sensing a connection to water, with her. He proceeded to tell me things, including a description of my childhood bedroom, and various other bits and pieces, which told me that he was accessing information that he ought not to have been accessing. And at the time, this was also very clear to Erik as well.
I was there on camera just watching it all unfold, and I'm stunned to a large degree watching it all. Because I knew a lot of these things about Laura. Even in Search of the Dead, there's a part where she says, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And even without us saying anything to each other, we knew what he was talking about. So it wasn't just, like putting two and together. It was obvious to us that he was talking about Laura's childhood experiences.
And quite unbelievably, so unbelievably that it's actually very difficult to express this, especially so many years later when this has, in a very odd way, become matter of fact for me. He was able to describe the existence of a young woman who, until that moment, I had assumed was a fictional character from a story that I had written as a child.
This young girl, it's almost like there's a warning with her, but it's not a bad warning. It's like a concerned feeling. Like there's something, I don't know if it's something that's happened, if there's something that's happened to her. I'm not getting a name for her. But since I've seen you, I keep getting the name Elizabeth. Elizabeth. I don't know.
Many years earlier, when I was around 10 or 11 years old and had recently moved into a new house, I began writing a story. This was nothing new. Ever since I could write, I have written make-believe stories. But this one was a little different because it was inspired by a series of dreams that I had had in which I had been shown things, communicated in some way with a young woman. And I thought the information that she had shared with me, information about her life, was brilliant inspiration for a story. Presumably that must have been what I thought as a child. And so I wrote down her story. And her story was that she had been murdered. She had been drowned by a man, a dark figure, an evil person. And I integrated her story within a fiction that I wrote. There's plenty of parts within the story that are fictional. I know this. You can see that they are the conjurations of a little girl's mind. But there are also many parts within that story that are very dark, very tragic, and very distasteful for a 10 or 11-year-old girl to have written about. And these aspects were given to me via a dream. Fast forward to filming for In Search of the Dead, and I was being retold the story that I had written by a man I had only just met. A man who claimed to be accessing this information via paranormal means, and that this information was not actually a fiction, but related to a very real person, a young woman who, in spirit, was connected to me and was indeed present with us at the moment that he was giving the reading.
It's Elizabeth. It's definitely, I keep hearing it, Elizabeth. Elizabeth. She's got long hair.
Colour or?
I'd say it's fair. I'd say it's like a light colour. And she got... I can only see it, like she's standing there, it is brushed back. And she's just standing there like this. And she got these... I can even see her shoes. Huh?
Is she round in the face?
No, she's quite pretty.
No, I mean, her like jawline, is it quite rounded?
No, the girl I'm seeing is quite thin.
What kind of age would you say she is?
I'm looking at that, and she could be between don't know. I'd say teenager, but she looks so petite. She could be a little bit older, and then she could be, do you know what I mean? She could be a little, but I'm feeling sort of like towards the 18-ish sort of range. She could be from 15 to 18. That's the sort of like age. What are you showing me that for?
The reason that she was connected to me, although not entirely clear, does in some way link to the fact that this man, the man who killed her, was also in spirit, and for whatever reason, whether that be through a locational link perhaps, for whatever reason was connected to me, that he had formed some sort of attachment to me, and in spirit form was lingering around me, haunting me, thinking, no doubt, evil thoughts. And this young woman who had been killed by him had taken it upon herself to act as some sort of spiritual guardian for me. At the time of filming, Richard, in the course of his reading, described seeing my childhood bedroom, and in particular he described a set of stone stairs going down. My childhood bedroom was in the cellar of the house in which my family and I lived. And he described these stairs, and he described this young girl as standing at the bottom of the stairs with her arms up in a protective stance to stop the spirit of her killer from coming down the stairs and into my bedroom to protect me. And as a child, I had always been terrified of that stairs. I would always move down them as quickly as I could and into my bedroom itself, and I would go over to the far corner of the room and look back at the doorway which led to the stairs in fear, half expecting somebody to enter the room behind me. At the time, I had written all of this off as an overactive childhood imagination. We all imagine things as children. We all scare ourselves, particularly in the dark, in atmospheric places. It's normal. But here I was filming in 2017, being told by a man that I'd just met that it wasn't normal. That there was actually a very good reason for why I had been scared as a child, and that reason was a man who had hurt and killed young women in the 19th century.
We never met this guy before, nothing. And there he has said everything. All these sort of events, for me, started to bring back certain meaning to certain memories I had. I remember staying at Laura's childhood home, and one morning, witnessing the blinds shake and fall off the window. I thought at the time a window was open, but when I examined it, no window was open, no air was coming into the room, nothing. At the time, I just sort of dismissed it. Indeed, at the time when I was younger, I probably would have dismissed many paranormal events. So as I gotten older, that I've gotten more into the paranormal. It sort of lured me in, lured Laura in, obviously. And that's what really gets me sometimes. She was just a young girl. She was incredibly young. And she was given this story. I mean, it's an incredibly dark story. Incredibly dark. About a man who preyed on young women, killed them. This is over 100 years ago it happened. But still, the scars seem to have still been left in the ether, in something. Enough so that Eliza, as a spirit, desperately sought somebody, and it was just Laura, as a young girl, that she found refuge in. And I don't know, to be given that sort of responsibility, that weight, so young in age. How do you even deal with that? And then to realize when you're older that happened, because you weren't fully aware that was being landed in your lap.
I was left completely baffled, emotional, and just confused, utterly confused by this encounter, by this revelation, because so much of what I was told made sense to me.
This is not a relative of any of ours. We're completely disassociated from it. We couldn't rationalize it. We tried. We spent probably months trying to rationalize it, debating back and forward with one another.
The information was very personal, and it was even information that I myself was not consciously aware of. It related to my childhood experiences, but not experiences that I had in any way, shape, or form believed to have been real. The writing of a story. These things were not actually real to me until the moment that I was told that they were. And so, in the interest of being open-minded and filming this documentary, I ran with it. I ran with the information that I had been given and wanted to see if I could find some historical backing for what I was being told, that a young woman had drowned, had been murdered, close to where I grew up in the 1800s.
One day we decided, well, we're just going to blindly go into the archives. We knew roughly a century. We knew we had 100 years to go by, and we're just going to go look through all these archives and see if anything aligns to what Laura experienced as a child and to what Richard described whilst reading her in the graveyard.
Our perimeters were very broad. We didn't have too much specific information, but that was what we did. For lack of anything else, that is what we did. We stayed in a B&B, and the morning that we woke with the intention of going to these archives, I had had a dream which I can't particularly remember the contents of, but all I know was that when I woke, I had a date in my head, or rather a year, and that year was 1856. I don't know how this year came into my mind. I don't know what the contents of the dream was in order for this to have remained with me. But when I woke, as soon as I woke, I was aware of this year and that it was important. And so, off the back of this, I decided to sit down and do some writing. I had, after all, been told that writing had been the thing to have led me to all of this, to this story, and so I picked up a pen and a piece of paper and I just wrote. Hand beckons me to follow her to a water's edge. Flowers, just like the ones in her hair. Opens lips to speak, but no sound. Why? She is frustrated. 1856. She places hand to heart. Just feel, she is smiling now. The water is a large pond, perhaps the one Richard described. She is in white, like always. Her hair is long and wavy. Guide me, please. 1856. But is this relevant? Trust, that is all. Trust. Blue eyes. The library is a good place, a place to start, not the end. The dark man, dark hair, black night, moon, trees, the water's edge, moon, reflection. Why are you there? Regret. No. How could she know? But she was a fool to go. So much lost. The point is gone, and I have to go. But wait, 1856 is what I need, and all she will give for now. Guide me. I will guide you, but you have to trust. And then the night rolls black, and I see the back of her hair against the water's reflection. The man is there, but all is so black. The stars are not shining. Black. Darkness. I was being told, seemingly by the spirit of the young woman who had been with me since I was 10 or 11 years old, to go to the archives and to have faith that I would find something. Presumably find her. That's what I thought. I thought that I would find her.
At the time, we were lost, so why not go with that? Why not run with 1856, I thought. and be extraordinary if there is something. We went to the archives and quite quickly we found, there was a girl. She seemed to match the profile of the girl Laura had written about and Richard had mentioned.
We found a news article, first of a young woman who disappeared, and second of a young woman, the same young woman's body being recovered from a river after being found drowned. And her name was Jane Blakemore. At this point, the story evolved. I, for whatever reason, was quite certain that Jane was not the spirit of the young woman who had been with me since I was young. And this was not necessarily due to the name difference. In my writings as a child, this supposedly fictional character had been named Susie, and I had been told by Richard that the name Elizabeth was relevant, so I didn't particularly know what this young woman was called, whether Richard was correct for saying Elizabeth or whether I had been originally correct for saying Susie. Either way, it wasn't Jane, but that was besides the point. I felt that this person, this new person, Jane Blakemore, was not that girl, that this was someone entirely different, but still connected somehow to the story that I had inadvertently tapped into.
I was largely skeptical at the time of the whole thing, and I was looking for an explanation, a rational explanation that I can hold on to. Does this happen all the time? We spent a few days going through all the regional newspapers from that century, and there was nothing really like that case. One that seemed kind of similar that happened over a decade later, but this does not happen every year. It wasn't a yearly occurrence. In fact, there was quite a lot of newspaper coverage to this event, which suggests that it's not exactly something that happens all the time. I was stunned by it. It was an incredible revelation that Laura, with a year in her mind, could come up with such a unique situation. That a dream led her to Jane Blakemore and her tragedy. So that's why we spend so many days, once again, us always seeking some rational explanation for this. We like rational explanations, you know? But there was nothing. There was just, it happened like that. And thus, we decided to keep going, running with sort of paranormal means to find out more.
So continuing with the spirit of discovery and exploration and being open-minded, Erik and I went to the river where Jane's body was found and recovered. And remarkably, it was only around 5 minutes from where we had been staying, the B&B that we had been staying. It was eerily close, and in hindsight, it's very difficult for me not to draw a connection between how we randomly ended up at that B&B, randomly, and that Jane was only 5 minutes away. So we went to the river, specifically the aqueduct, which is very close to where Jane's body was recovered in April 1856. And there I did another stream of consciousness writing. And it was very emotional for me. There's footage included within the documentary that shows me actually doing the writing. I could feel like I could see her. I could see this young woman, this dead young woman, floating in the river with her hair in the water, the dress that she was wearing waterlogged and floating also. And that was Jane.
What she came out with was incredible. I didn't know what to make of it. Like, she could see her. She was, like, see her body in the water. That she looked different from her girl. It seemed very real.
Blue eyes, I followed. 1856. Yes, buttercups, flowers in your hair. Moonlight is always present. Jane. Dark hair, crooked front tooth. Reeds, dress swirling in the water. Already dead. Gone. Floating. Still eyes. Brown eyes. Blue eyes. He must be brought to justice. Yes, I know. You need to help me. Sunlight, stay in its warmth. I need you, not the darkness. Now a schoolhouse. The inquest? What do you mean? He was a teacher, or you? He travelled from village to village? A confidant. Kind eyes, sometimes. Greasy hair. Okay, enough. How can I find him from a description? But these things are important. You trust me more than yesterday. She cackles when I say I am insane. Maybe we both are. Loneliness can make anyone turn to the lunar cycle of madness. Birds chirping. Okay, come back, please. I need more information. I will help you, we both say. Why do I need help? I am part of you. You are like Jane, like me. Be careful. Moonlight again. And that man. This time a pond, the body of water. Not here, the river. 1870s. What is that year? Is this the journal, something else, or madness? I am tired. We are all tired. All of us. There are more. Neither Jane nor I mark the start or end. He was good at his chosen career. Devil, but not in hell. God has not judged him. His soul is lighter than a feather.
Although we did further research after this to try to find Elizabeth, and indeed the man who we were being led to believe had killed both her and Jane, we were not able to uncover anything more of interest. We did look into the case of another young woman called Margaret Perrin, who we discuss in Search of the Dead also, but I'm going to put a question mark over her. In the years since, I'm not convinced either way as to her connection to this case. Perhaps she is part of this story, but I just don't know. So ultimately we ended the documentary and also the search roughly in the same place. What you see at the end of In Search of the Dead is roundabouts where we ended our search, at least until more recently. It would be disingenuous for me to say that this has not affected me at a deeply personal level. I cannot even express it to myself what any of this means or how this has really made me feel, because it is so utterly unusual, so utterly at odds with what we are told the world is from a very young age and what we are led to believe is so. Whether that be the existence of life after death and ghosts and all of that, or even the idea that somebody could commit such evil, there's no other word for it, and go unpunished, so utterly unpunished. We are told as children, if you do something wrong, there will be consequences. Of course, as we grow into adults, we learn that that's not always so. But to be struck with that in such a real way, and in such a black and white way as well, to have young women, Jane Blakemore was 17, young women, girls, children, who had not yet had a chance to live their life, were innocent in the truest sense of the word, to be snuffed out by someone so dark, who would then go on to do it again and again, and God knows how many times, and for nothing to happen, nothing, for him to walk free. It's profoundly disturbing. The distance of time makes no difference. These are still people. They're still young women who went through that. And so I did attempt a few more streams of consciousness after we concluded In Search of the Dead, but ultimately took a break.
We were relieved, really, that we were able to put some sort of narrative to the whole story. We suffered file damage. We went through a lot in the post-production. And we were just extremely relieved. In 2019, we released it. It was done. Good.
I was so exhausted by it that I was done. I had been tasked with something seemingly that felt so beyond me, that felt too big, too horrible for me to deal with. I was so under-equipped to deal with this. And so I was happy to put it to one side with the conclusion of that film.
Now, we, who started off with curiosity, have a responsibility to these girls. That was so utterly failed in life, it seems. And their lives were stolen from them. That's quite a responsibility. For Laura to have been given that, she never asked for anything like that. She never wanted anything like that. As a husband, I felt torn. Because, of course, you feel a bit like it's unfair that Laura's been put through that. I wanted to support her, and I also wanted to help out these girls. We just didn't know how, but that's sort of what I wanted to do, and still want to do. But watching Laura try these streams of consciousness, because she did them afterwards, but she said she couldn't stop the voices. She couldn't stop the streams of consciousness. It's as though she was tapping into something else. That's why she stopped for a few years. I completely understand that. To feel like your mind and your consciousness are kind of running away from you. Like you almost possessed by something. It was unhealthy. It took years for us to really face it again.
Erik and I decided to do some experimentation in regards to spirit boards. Our interest was piqued through a couple of experiences that we had had, and so we were using a board at home with family and getting results, so it seemed, speaking with seeming family members, deceased family members, and having quite incredible results. The results didn't come immediately. It took practice for us to use the board in a way that seemed to be effective, but ultimately we were getting interesting results, enough to encourage us to keep doing this and to keep experimenting to see where it led.
And then one day, popped Eliza, and it was very emotional, because we had sort of stopped looking into it for years, and there was a bit of a guilty conscience for both of us that we had moved away from that and had been doing other things. But there she was on the board, reminding us, hey, look at me.
And it seemed as though her coming onto the board was just a way for her to say that she was still there, she was still watching over me, and that she still wanted me to find her story, and to find what had happened to her, and to find the man responsible.
Is that you, Eliza? I redid the paper, but it's still the same position as yes, no, and then I also added don't know for when you're not sure of the answer to something. Is that you? Yes. Could you give me something so that I can confirm it's you, darling? Can you give me a number? Just so that I know that it's you, for protection, yes? When you've got your energy. Give me one of the numbers that you've given me before, so that I know that it's you.
Thank you.
I'll let you pick. Give me a number?
You just get used to it board.
Yeah. When you're ready. Give me a number that I know that it's you. 1. Next number, please, I'll go to know if I've got it wrong. 8. Next number, please, I'll go to know if I've got it wrong. 5. Next number, please, I'll go to know if I've got it wrong. 6. Thank you, darling. Are you okay? Are you okay to talk? Yeah.
And so our experiments on the spirit board took a new turn. We now had focus, and that focus was Elizabeth. After speaking with her once or twice, we had someone new come on the board again. Only they weren't new. They were someone that we knew all too well. It was Jane Blakemore, the 17-year-old who, in 1856, had gone missing from the farm at which she worked and lived, had gone missing for 10 weeks, and was later recovered, dead, found drowned in the river very close to the farm.
When you're able to, can you answer, are you Jane? Yes. Hello, Jane. If you are Jane, I'm sorry I have to ask you this, but I have to check that you are Jane. Could you tell me what your mother's name is, please, Jane? Could you spell it out for me, please? Yes, thank you, darling. Just go to the letters, yes? Here and here. When you're ready and you've got your energy, if you could spell out your mother's name, please, so that I know that you are Jane. Is that an R, Jane? It's an S. Next letter, please, Jane. Just take your time if you need, darling. I know you use a lot of energy. If it's an S, can you go to the next letter, please? Next letter, please, Jane. Ooh. Sorry, S-A. Yeah, I didn't say it. I'm sorry, Jane. Next letter, please. Yes. S-A-R. Next letter, please, Jane. Thank you, Jane. And the last one. A. A, thank you, Jane. S-A-R-A. And the next letter, please, Jane. When you're ready. Thank you, darling. It's really nice to speak with you again, Jane.
She introduced herself on the board. She spelt out words related to her identity, the place where she had been born, the names of her parents, things like that. And she was phenomenal. So capable, on the board, so confident, so clear in what she wanted to tell us. After we had spoken with her, Erik and I were left wondering, well, how can this be so? This is a young woman from the mid-19th century. How can she use this board with such proficiency? Especially as when speaking with Eliza, she seemed to express that she couldn't read or write, and although could use the yes and the no on the board when prompted where they were and which word was which, was not particularly able to do much in terms of spelling and expression. And by contrast, Jane was very, very able. She was even spelling out sentences. So Erik and I were left a bit perplexed by this and why this may have been so. Was this actually Jane? How was she able to communicate so differently from Eliza, another young woman from presumably the same time period? And we did research into this and actually found that there was a very strong likelihood that Jane had attended a school that had been set up by a wealthy widow for girls from that area. And on top of all of that, the school was in the very same place where Erik and I had stayed in that B&B all those years ago. It was in the same village, only a stone's throw away from the archives that we went to and from, of course, the location of Jane's death. So everything was neatly pulling together in this unusual and profound way. So Jane was educated and she was confident and she was able to express herself on the board and in a way became the spokesperson for her and Eliza and for, so we have been led to believe, the other girls out there who were also murdered by this same man. Now, it was not enough to just speak to these girls. For our own sake and also theirs, Erik and I wanted to prove that they were real, prove that this had actually happened to them. With Jane, we of course had found proof that she existed, found proof that she had died at a young age, that she had been found drowned in 1856. Given that we were told, and I as a child had somehow came to know, that Elizabeth had also drowned, or that her death in some way had been related to a lake, a large body of water, this fit in the same way. There was drownings, there was water. This is some kind of motive or same set of circumstance that this killer goes through each time he claims another life. And so we never really thought too much about this information, other than it seemed to provide confirmation that we were dealing with the same story. Then one day we met with our by now friend, Richard, the medium from whom we had had this revelation to begin with. And we were talking with him, telling him about this story, about our communications with Jane. And he said that he got a strange sense that Jane hadn't actually drowned. He said that he could feel a pressure on his throat, almost as if someone had grabbed him from behind and was smothering him. And that was all he really said, but he did request that next time we spoke with Jane using the spirit board, that we ask her, how did she die? And that perhaps we were missing something, that we had taken for granted, that because she had been found in the river, and because the inquest into her death had concluded that she had been found drowned, that we were taking for granted that this was so. We were in somewhat frequent communication with Eliza, and we began a session much the same as we normally would, requesting for her if she wished to come and speak with us on the board, asking only for her, wanting to see how she was, if she had any information that might help us in trying to find her and her story. And the board was quiet. We sat there for quite a while, asking if Elizabeth would like to come forward. Was she there? Was she able to speak with us as she had done previously? And there was no movement. It was silent. So then we thought we would change and try something different, and asked specifically if Jane was there and if she would like to come forward and would like to speak with us. And the thimble moved, and it was Jane.
So in a moment, could you give me, when you've got your energy built up, could you spell the name of the place where you were born, darling, so that we know that we're talking with you and no one else? Okay, what's the first letter, darling?
E.
E. Next letter, please, darling. Y. Next letter, please, darling. Next letter, please, darling. T. Is it Iton, darling? Yes, okay, thank you, darling.
The way that the thimble moved seemed very similar to how we had spoken to her before. There was a confidence about the movement which suggested to us that it was the same energy. And we spoke with her for a long time, and eventually came round to asking her about how she had died. This, of course, is not an easy thing to ask someone, particularly someone who you know was killed. But we felt as though there was something to what Richard had said, and that it needed to be confirmed. Had she drowned? Or did something else happen that day in 1856?
Is it okay, Jane, for us to talk about the day that you died, darling? Can I ask you some questions about it? I know that it's upsetting. Is it okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, darling. Okay. Did you work on a farm, Jane? Yes, okay. day you died, darling, did anything strange happen that day? Yes. Okay. Are you able to tell us what that strange thing was?
Oh, give us a word.
Give us a word or something like that. A. Next letter, please. We're going to know if I've got it wrong. Next letter, please. D. Next letter, please. What's the next letter? A, D, E. Next letter, please, darling. What's the next letter, Jane?
Basement.
L. Next letter, please, darling. A, D, E, L. We'll go to know if I've got it wrong.
Guess.
What?
Delivery.
Oh, was it a delivery, darling? She's stuck. So I'm going, sorry. Sorry, I'm just going to lift it up. Was it a delivery, Jane? Yes. What was strange about the delivery, darling? When you're ready, if you could... Was it... Okay, how about this? Was it that the objects, the items that were being delivered, were they strange? Was it the time of day that they were being delivered? Was that strange? Was the time of day that the delivery happened strange? Is it yes, but there was also something else that was strange? Yes, so it was the time of day was strange. Was the person doing the delivery, were they strange? Was the person doing the delivery the man who killed you, Jane? Thank you, darling. Had you ever seen him before? Had you ever seen him before?
Oh dear. It's okay, Jane.
It's alright.
I understand.
I know.
I would understand.
You are doing so well. I'm so proud of what you are doing, Jane, okay? You are so strong. Had you ever seen him before? Had he delivered things to the house before?
Just
Had you seen him in Longdon before? About the village and things like that? Had you seen him on the river before?
maybe not that house. Somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. Had you seen him in Ironbridge? Yes. Did he work in Ironbridge?
No.
Did-
Delivery.
Yeah, did he work in lots of places doing deliveries? Did he work in lots of places? Did he live in Ironbridge? Okay, but you'd just seen him before in Ironbridge. Yeah. But did you know him? Did you know who he was?
No, she just saw him.
Okay. So he was strange. As soon as you saw him, he was strange. Did he look at you weird? Did he look at you strange? Did he
How old are you?
say something strange to you? Did he do something strange? Before he killed you, did you think he was strange? Okay. Was he foreign, Jane? Yes. Is that why he was strange? Yes. Okay. Did he speak English? If you don't know, just come here. Did he speak English, Jane? You don't know.
That answers another question. Did she ever speak to her?
Yeah, so did he ever speak to you? Like in a foreign language? Did he speak to you in a foreign language? Yes.
Could you identify it?
Yeah. Do you know what language it was? Can you speak that language? No. Okay.
Can you spell out what it was?
Yeah, what language was it, darling? Can you please spell it for us?
Jesus.
S. Next letter, please, Jane. I'll go to know if I've got it wrong. Next letter. S. What's the next letter? What language did this man speak? When you're ready, please, darling. Get your energy back. Because you mean strange as in like the true meaning of it. Because that's what it is.
Yeah. Trange.
Yeah. And the time of day was strange as well.
Yeah.
Like he came, because she went outside at 8 o'clock. So maybe he was there doing the delivery at night. And that was strange.
Just keep to the language.
Yeah. So the first letter was S, darling. When you're ready, what's the next letter? What language did this man speak? It's okay, darling. It's okay. It's alright. I know. You're helping us, darling. You're really helping us. What language does he speak, darling? S. Next letter, please. I'll go to know if it's wrong. W. Next letter, please, darling. What next letter? E. Next letter, please, darling. E. Next letter, please, darling. I'll go to know if it's wrong. Okay. S. W. E. What's the next letter, please, Jane? D.
Which?
Next letter, please, Jane. You're doing really well. I. Next letter, please, Jane. What's the next letter, please, darling? What's the next letter, please, darling? E. Next letter, please, darling. I'll go to know if I got it wrong. No. S. W. E. D. I. What's the next letter, darling? H. Next letter, I'll go to know if I've got it wrong. S. W. E. D. I. What's the next letter, please, darling? Is it Swedish, Jane? Okay. What the hell?
He came by boat to deliver some goods to the farm. That was his job. He worked for, seemingly, a blacksmith, or that was one of his clients. Perhaps he worked for multiple people, delivering items. And he travelled on a boat. Travelled to the farm. She had seen him before, although she did not know him. She had seen him working in Ironbridge, which is not too far away from Longden-upon-Tern and is, in fact, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. There would have been much need for goods to have come in and out of that place, particularly things related to ironworks, ironmongery. And that was his job, so she said. She said that there was something unusual about the man himself, that he was Swedish. And Erik and I were very confused by this. We weren't expecting this information at all. It seemed quite random to us. Not impossible, but very random. And we've done research that's revealed that this is not actually as random as it may first appear. Between 1846 and 1930, roughly 1.3 million people, about 20% of the country's population, left Sweden. Whilst the United States absorbed many of these migrants, the United Kingdom, given its booming economy and industrial prosperity, attracted considerable numbers also. And even those en route to America would have inevitably passed through the UK, pausing their relocation in some cases for several years. With Sweden boasting a long history of producing high-quality iron ore, it is reasonable to speculate that Swedish migrants would have found work within the mines, foundries, and waterways of Ironbridge and the surrounding area. So that a Swedish man would be in the area was perhaps not as unusual as it first appeared, especially when we're being told that his job is to move goods up and down the river, to move iron. And so that was why he was at the farm. He was delivering something, I don't know what, maybe horseshoes, who knows. He was delivering something to the farm.
When did he speak to you, Jane? Was it... I'm sorry, darling, was it when he was killing you? When he grabbed you and did things to you? Is that when he spoke to you? In Swedish? I'm sorry, darling. I know. Was it then? Yes. But did he speak to you before then, as well? No. Okay, my darling. Are you okay to keep talking, Jane? Are you okay? Are you okay to keep talking? Well done, darling. You're so brave. You're so wonderful. Now I'm going to ask you some more questions, darling. They may be difficult, but you are really brave. I know you can do it. Did he drown you, Jane? Did this man drown you in the water? Did he drown you?
Stick to answer questions.
No, we're there now. I know. Do you know how you died, Jane? Yeah, okay, darling. I'm so sorry, darling. I need to know so I can find out who he was, why he was doing this, and how it was similar, or if it was similar to the other poor girls that he did this to, okay? Because if I can find a pattern, I can find him, and I can say what he did and how disgusting and evil he is, okay? Yeah. Okay? Just take a moment, darling. When you're ready, could you please tell me, did he drown you? Did he drown you in the water, Jane? Thank you, darling. Did he strangle you? Did he suffocate you? Okay, darling, thank you, darling. What did he use, darling? Was there a rope on you? Was there a rope on you? No? Was that just a rumour? There was something about a rope afterwards. Okay, darling. Did he take you away from the river? Did he take you away from the river by travelling on the river? Like on a boat? Did he use a boat? Yes. Were you already dead? I'm so sorry, Jane. I'm so sorry. Do you know where he took you? Yeah, okay. Could you spell out where he took you, please, darling? The place or whatever it is. Can you spell it out, please, darling? When you're ready, take a moment, darling. Just take a moment. It's perfectly fine. When you're ready, if you could tell us where he took you.
I feel like a pain in my gut. Pain. Yes, that question.
Like you feel her pain?
Ache pain.
Yeah, I know.
Oui.
Yeah.
Sorry, pain.
You want to come to me, Jane? You come to me if you want. You come to me. You come to me, darling. I'll look after you best I'm able to, okay? Come to me. I'm here for you, Jane, okay? I'm sorry I have to ask you this. I really hope that you understand. I hope you understand why I ask you. I hate him, okay? I hate what he did to you.
As we spoke with Jane on the board, quite understandably, if you can just for a moment imagine what it is that we believe we're doing. We're talking with a woman, a girl, a 17-year-old girl who was killed. Quite understandably, she got upset. And this, of course, is not someone sitting there crying, because they're invisible, they're a spirit, they're not there. This is a thimble moving on a piece of paper, seemingly of its own volition, spiraling, unable to focus on the letters that until that moment she had been very capable of moving to and spelling out, spiraling in agony, and so upset because she's reliving her end. But she wanted to tell us. She wanted to tell us.
Are you okay to keep talking? Just be honest. If you don't want to, go to no. If you're okay, go to yes. It's perfectly fine either way. Yeah, okay, darling. Whenever you're ready, could you please tell us where he took you?
Letting my finger off.
I. Next letter, please, Jane. I'll go to no if it's wrong. R. Next letter, please, Jane. I'll go to no if it's wrong. Okay. Is it Ironbridge, darling? Thank you.
And she told us that no, she hadn't drowned. She had been smothered, suffocated. And then she had been taken somewhere else. She hadn't been put in the river. She'd been taken away from the river. She described being taken to some sort of storage that this man kept, storage related to his work. And then when he was done with her, 10 weeks later, he took her back to the river beside which he had killed her and returned her body. He dumped it in the river and left again. And then she was found. And in the inquest that followed, they presumed that she had drowned and had been there unfound, despite them having looked for her, had been there unfound for 10 weeks. But according to Jane, through the spirit board, this was utterly not so. And this was entirely new to us. We had never presumed any of this or even considered it. We had thought killer had come, drowned her, left her body where he had taken her life, and gone away.
And once again, in the chain of extraordinary breadcrumbs the paranormal leaves for us, Laura said, after this Ouija board session, "Oh, I wish we had a doctor to look at this." The next day, literally the very next day, a doctor interested in the paranormal contacted us. We were completely stunned.
We have the coroner's report from the inquest. It was published in the newspaper. Bits of it were published, and also in the record separately. We have the report. It's not supremely detailed, but it is there. And to me, as a layperson, it looks like she drowned. I don't know what I'm looking for. If they say she was found drowned, it seemed to me she was found drowned. But I thought if only we had a doctor to look at this, to confirm this. And as if by magic, so that's the only way I can describe it, as if by magic, the very next day, we gained a new member via our Patreon. And we give out merchandise and Halloween and Christmas cards through that. So we had his address. So I could see his full name and address. And in his name, he was a doctor. A doctor with an interest in the paranormal, and more than that, an interest in the work that I did for the Paranormal Scholar. And I thought, surely this can't be so. Surely there's a reason why this person has entered my life right now. And so I sent him what must have been one of the most peculiar messages that he's ever received, asking him if he could do me the biggest favour and look at a medical document from the 1800s and give me his thoughts on it. And he did that.
And he confirmed that she had not drowned.
So I have our correspondence here, including the historical documents that I sent to him. And I sent him some questions, as well as asking him to more generally look at the coroner's report from the inquest and just give his opinion. So in particular, I asked him about a phrase from the coroner's report which described the lungs as being inflated with air, but not congested. So I thought that perhaps the lack of water within the lungs might be indicative that she hadn't actually drowned. However, upon replying and giving his synopsis of the coroner's report, he said this was somewhat irrelevant in determining that, as there are such things as dry drownings, where a part of the body and mechanism takes place that looks down over the trachea, sealing the lungs and the breathing pipe and keeping them dry from any water coming in. So you can drown and actually be completely dry internally. So there was no way to tell based on that whether she had drowned or not. However, it was very interesting from another perspective. The issue is the non-congested lungs with air in them. This is not indicative of her dying outside the water alone. It does likely indicate that, except in a dry drowning. But the issue is that, after about 4 to 5 days, it wouldn't matter if she died on the moon. Her body being in the water for over 48 to 72 hours would show signs of water entering the lungs and the stomach via the trachea and esophagus. In short, cause of death is not particularly important here. However she died, she would have had water in her lungs if she had been in the river for 10 weeks. Only she didn't, meaning that Jane Blakemore was not in that river for 10 weeks. It's medically impossible. And he goes on to say, this means she was likely only put in the water a maximum of 1 to 4 days prior to her body being discovered. And honestly, I would lean towards the shorter end of that. Many people think that a non-drowning will allow the lungs to stay dry for a long time, but it is simply not true. Water and liquids would enter the body unless her nose and mouth were sealed and wrapped in waterproof barriers. This means she had only just been thrown into the water. And of course, this also helps to explain why, when she originally went missing in February of that year, she wasn't found in the water. They dredged the river, they searched for her, and her body wasn't found. After they found her, they thought that perhaps it had sunk and become tangled in some of the vegetation in the water, and that's why when they dredged, they've been unable to find her. But the reality is that they were unable to find her because she wasn't in there. She was somewhere else. And if we believe what she seemingly has told us via the spirit board, it's because she was taken by her killer to some sort of lair where he kept his deceased victims for whatever perverse reason until he was done with them and then returned them to where he had killed them. Also, looking at the decomposition of her body as was recorded at the time, Dr. Andrews suggests that she had been allowed to decompose in the dry, that the level of decomposition was more consistent with a dry decomposition than with someone who had been in the water for an elongated period of time. So he writes, in this case, modern medical and forensic science says she was definitely killed somewhere else, dry, and allowed to basically decompose, and only in the most recent few days or nights was her body transferred to the river where she was found. So I'm not just telling you this. I've had this medically verified. And the man who so very kindly helped me is more than willing to be identified publicly. We've spoken about this, and his name is Dr. Andrew M. Gross. He is a spinal surgeon. I have his biography, if you like, here. He attended Temple University School of Medicine in Philadelphia. His residency training was at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, particularly in the departments of neurosurgery and anesthesiology. He currently works in private practice. And on top of all of that, he confirmed his synopsis of the case with a colleague, a medical examiner, and also with articles from medical journals on forensic pathology. So this has been verified not just by one medical professional, but by two. Two highly qualified people who know what they are talking about when it comes to death and the cause of death and how the human body works. Jane Blakemore was not drowned. She was murdered. And this is information that I gathered through paranormal means, through mediumship, through spirit communication via stream of consciousness writing, and also the use of a spirit board. Using that in conjunction with historical records and medical knowledge, medical professional knowledge, it all points to the same place. Jane Blakemore was murdered. Jane Blakemore did not drown. She was killed, taken somewhere by the person who killed her, and then returned to the place of her death 10 weeks later, for it to be concluded as some sort of tragedy.
For years, I held out for a rational explanation of some sort. I don't know what, because it was incredibly odd. But I thought maybe there's just something we're missing. And it was this point, this very clear-cut evidence that even the most rational part of my brain just had to shut down. She had been killed. Jane Blakemore was murdered. What led us to this very solid fact was a chain of paranormal events that was based upon a presumption that there was a serial killer in the 19th century preying on young women. Now we haven't proved that yet, because we only have one girl that was murdered. We don't know by whom. So there's still a lot to find out there. We can only assume, since these chain of events that started from this presumption led us to this fact that Jane Blakemore was murdered and placed in the water by a killer, that there is something in that assumption. I mean, to call it an assumption is perhaps too loose, because it's not just whimsical. We have been told through paranormal means that there was a serial killer at work here. And it would seem that one of the reasons why Eliza is so strong is that she wants to bring this man to justice. She wants to bring his crimes to the world and wants to bring his identity to the world. That is why she brought Jane onto the Ouija board. So there are other girls out there. We don't know exactly how we're going to find them. We're going to continue to work to find them. And we're going to find this killer. Because we've been led this way this far. And I like to think there's a reason for that. I don't think it would end here. This is just another step. A big step, but another step.
In addition to speaking with Jane using spirit boards, we have used other spiritual means, as I've mentioned. We've also had conversations with Jane using mobile applications, including GhostTube Seer. And I wanted to share with you some of the images here that we've received. images that she's presented to us about what happened to her, including images of herself, images of the place of death, which I believe looks very similar to the fields around the River Tern as they are today, and presumably as they would have been all those years before. Open countryside. Also images of her killer, and also an image of what looks to be her body being medically examined by the coroner who attended the inquest into her death after she was found. I'm never going to be able to express this properly on camera because it is so incredible and I know it sounds so unbelievable. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell Jane's story as she has told it to me, and other people have told it to me. That's the only reason that I'm here, telling you this. You can think I'm insane, I don't care. You can think I'm lying, I don't care. You cannot believe me, I don't care, because that's not the reason why I'm here. The reason I'm here is because at the age of 10, a dead young woman came to me and told me that she had been killed, and that that same man wished harm upon me, and that she was there for me to look after me. And then years later, as a woman, I met another young woman who was killed by the same man. And not only had she been killed by him, her life had been robbed, her future, her potential, her offspring, her descendants had all been robbed and snuffed out in that instant, that no one even realized that she had been killed, let alone punish the man who did it. I'm doing this for them because I want their stories to be out there in whatever way that I'm able to put them out there, to get even the smallest amount of justice, for there to be a record somewhere to counteract the other record that exists that says she was found drowned, for there to be a new record that says that she was killed. Recently, Erik and I made the journey once again to Longdon upon Tern. It was the anniversary of her body being recovered from the river, and we've known for a while that we wanted to make this video. For her, we just wanted to make sure that we had the ability to do it right. And so knowing that we were finally going to sit down and make this for her soon, we went there to pay our respects, and hopefully to bring a new energy to that place on that day. To let her know that she's not forgotten, that she's remembered. Not just as a tragic young woman who lost her life, but as an intelligent and vibrant soul, an educated young woman who had just started a new job and was saving money for her future, who was loved by her parents, by her family, by her siblings. When she went missing, a reward was put out by her father for information concerning her. When she was found, the lady who found her knew immediately that this was Jane Blakemore, the girl who had gone missing, that everyone had worried over so much. She was not a nobody. She was not easily missed. She was happy. Her employer, William Miner, the farmer whom she worked for as a housemaid, said that she was happy in her job. She seemed to be making friends with Sarah, the cook with whom she worked. They had both started the job only very recently, around Christmas, a few months before she went missing. She was the oldest of her parents' children. I'm quite sure that her siblings would have missed her so much. She was a child. And I don't fully understand why or how her path has crossed with mine, but I'm glad that it has. And I hope that you like this video, Jane. I'm done.